nothing is worse than the what if. I'd much rather do something, it goes left, and knowing that I've done it, as opposed to like not knowing, thinking, man, I could have done X, Y, and Z had I not been so scared. There are so many situations in which we ask people, what do you do? And then we make our own decisions in terms of how we are going to rank them in society, how we're going to value them, how we are going to place worth on what they have to say. In that moment, where I'm no longer employed, I now have less worth to some people. I've bought a flat and now I don't know how I'm gonna pay my mortgage. It was a scary time, but I really shout out my late uncle at the time, who was always been like my backbone, just giving me that motivation to be like, nah, like it shall be well, the storm will pass, and that whatever you're going through, it will pass.
When it comes to marketing, it's about like communicating ideas, especially from the perspective of like something or some brand or some product which has benefits, but it can't speak for itself. So your job is basically to communicate that, to translate it into a language for people to understand. So on that subject of like communication and like breaking things down, I'm quite interested to learn from you, like when you kind of like had an interest for that, but also knew that you were good at it.
Thanks. Expertise and being good at those are separate points. But in terms of like the interest, from a young age, I was fascinated with adverts, and I didn't understand why. But I just remembered always having like an inkling to remembering an advert or logos, and like having a certain affinity towards it that didn't really make sense. I would just be able to know like, oh yeah, that brand. That means that, even if I didn't understand what the brand was. Like one of my earliest examples was actually the Martini brand. And I think I used to see it on race cars because it was sponsored racing, but it's hilarious now, like fast forward how many years later, I work for the company that owns Martini. But as a child, like I had a relationship with that brand without even knowing anything about it. So from young, I've just always been fascinated with how companies talk to consumers, and like the fact that a company is not a person, but good brands have personalities, and like whether it's for you or it's not yet for you, you know there are certain associations or certain feelings that you have, and you can pinpoint it to a brand. So for instance, when we were young, we couldn't drive, but you already knew that at some point when you can drive, you like the idea of a Mercedes or you like the idea of a Lamborghini because of whatever feelings it evokes in you. And that always fascinated me. So when it got time to like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked doing that. So I was just trying to desperately find what was the closest thing to recreating that feeling. And then I learned in business studies, I learned the side that I was most drawn to was the marketing side, when really it borderlands with advertising, but that's what kind of spikes my interest to actually look into that and, you know, go into that as a career option.
Yeah, I like that answer, especially about brands becoming like personal, because there was a distinction between like brands just feeling quite far removed and then brands need to have a personality, otherwise people are not gonna buy from them. And I think that kind of piece, but even like with advertising versus marketing, like I didn't necessarily understand the difference. I kind of saw them all together.
Same, and like it was funny because when I got into like understanding marketing, I realized actually the bit that I was liking the most was advertising, in terms of the actual how they like the marketing sets the kind of, this is our identity, this is what we believe we should stand for. But then in terms of how you actually get that to the people, so it's all well and good you having like a brand world, like a set of guidelines, and this is how we are, but you need someone to convey that in a way that's actually going to land, because there's like thousands of messages that everyone's exposed to every day. So how are you doing that? And good advertising is a way to do that. So I've looked into advertising and quickly realized that I hate advertising. I done an internship. I'm jumping all over the place, but I done an internship after placement. You know, we done our placement year, and I worked in B2B for a company called Dow Jones, and it wasn't the type of marketing that I thought. It was very much like corporate stuffy. It wasn't the stuff that I grew up on. And then I had the chance after that to work for an agency which actually does like advertise like creative stuff. And I was like, yeah, sounds great. Man, that's easily one of the worst jobs I ever had.
Really? Why?
It was 2 weeks. I'm from South London and it was in White City. So the commute in itself was nuts. Wasn't getting paid. You got like £50 for like travel and food, which doesn't go that far. And the highlight for me, or the low light rather, was when they tried to have all the interns clean a fish tank. And I just point blank refused.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they literally, we were meant to clean like, you know, is it Devil Wear Prada where she's like like she has to earn her stripes and everything? I had never seen that in real life, but they literally, like, it was so hierarchical and they wanted you to be like, earn your stripes. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, I'm in uni. I've just done a year placement working for a company. I'm not coming here to not get paid, to be a gopher and do stuff. But I realized I really didn't, can you swear on this podcast or no? I didn't appreciate the fact that an agency is the client's bitch. And you put yourself out there in the hope that they say, yes, we're gonna go ahead. Like, you do all this work and pitch an idea, but the client can be like, yeah, we're not down. And you spend all this money, hard work, time, energy, and for what? And I didn't like that power dynamic. I hated it, in fact.
It's interesting because normally, like, from the outside of you, I've always thought like agencies are kind of the place to be because
if you like,
you have the variation of projects and clients.
Do coke in the toilets, and all that kind of stuff. Like, obviously, I'm generalizing, but for some people, that's going to be naturally more your speed in terms of, like, you know, if you're more creative, you like variety. But for someone like me, that I like organized chaos. So I need to have the parameters set, and then within there I can go nuts. But if it's like completely just loose and it's like, oh yeah, one day you might be cleaning the fish tank, another day you might be on set. Nah, that doesn't work for me. So and obviously there are different agencies, but agency life as a whole, from my experience, it just was never for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know, cleaning a fish tank, I guess because it's so competitive, like they're saying, how much do you want it? Like, how desperate are you?
Not that much, clearly.
So then what was your first, so what am I saying, what was it? I know what your first role is. So, yeah.
Are we talking about like after uni?
Yeah, so after uni,
okay.
So boom, you went into Diageo.
Yeah.
That was a grad scheme.
Even that was funny because you were definitely, so we were in uni and it was January exams or something. And obviously the whole pressure was you need to get first. You need to get first, and you need to get secure a placement so that after uni you've got your job. And like, you know, it was like the rat race. It was like Hunger Games. Like, you could tell the people that were smug and got it in October, November. I think you got yours quite early, right?
Yeah. I had my offer.
Whereas the rest of us, like, we weren't all as lucky. And then I had opportunity to go to an assessment center for this company that I'd seen advertise on campus. And again, you know, I love brands. One day we went to an FMCG fair, and then on the table are all these brands that I've grown up loving, from, like, you know, Guinness, Baileys, and I'm Nigerian, so these brands have always been associated with, like, parties or in the household. Even though I was never old enough to drink them, I was like, wow, like, one company owns these brands. So when I found out that there is a job in marketing for that company, I'm like, this is a match made in heaven. The only caveat was, when I got through to the assessment center, it coincided with one of our exams, like a double module exam. Do you remember this?
I can't remember this.
Oh, and then I remember being like, damn, I really want this job, but I really also want to get my first or get a good grade, because it was like a weighty exam. And I remember I surveyed a few people, probably like 10, and 70% of those people said, you can't miss the exam. You were one of them. And I remember in that moment being like, I'm in uni to get a good job. So I'm now going to miss the opportunity to get a job so I could stay in uni to get a job. It didn't make any sense. And I was like, I hate what ifs. I would feel a lot better if I go for it. Whatever happens, knowing that I did it, as opposed to, like, imagine I do the exam and I have a bad day and I failed the exam and I've missed the opportunity. Yeah. But yeah, I went, got into it, was the only black person in my intake, like, in the whole company at one point. It was crazy, but did that for a few years. So I worked for the leading spirits producer in the world.
How was the exam, by the way? Did you come back to do it?
No.
Or just left it?
I missed it.
And you still got it first as well?
Yes,
yeah,
I
you
got
smashed it. You actually smashed it.
But at the time, I didn't feel like I smashed it. It was a massive risk.
Still paid off though.
It did pay off, and I'm just a big believer in like nothing is worse than the what if. So I'd much rather do something, it goes left, and knowing that I've done it, as opposed to like not knowing, because the way my mind wanders, I'll be thinking, man, I could have done X, Y, and Z had I not been so scared. So
have you always had that what if mentality, or is that something that kind of...
It's something that I've learned from experiences where I didn't do something, and then I have that kind of niggling regret, and I talk to myself a lot, and I have an inner voice, and it's never as loud as when I feel that I haven't jumped at an opportunity, or I've just left a room for the universe to interpret in another way, as opposed to like I could have like put a stake in the ground and been like, actually, I'm going to attempt it, and then whatever happens, happens.
Awesome. So, I like that. So talk to me about the grad scheme. So
yeah,
you're doing that. It's like a 3-year grad scheme.
3-year grad scheme, like each year, different rotation. The first year, that was a funny story in itself. I remember we'd left the university in Birmingham. The whole summer, I hadn't really heard from them other than the fact that I knew I got the grad scheme. The day after I moved all of my stuff down from Birmingham back to London, I got told by this company, great, for your first job, we're going to give you a car, you're going to drive around an area, selling to bars and clubs. Sounds great on paper. And by the way, we're going to put you in Birmingham. And I remember just thinking, what are the odds of the day after I've left Birmingham that I'm put there? But anyway, it was a really interesting experience, because here I am, like, how old was I when you finished uni? Like 20, 21, driving around the Midlands. And I don't know how familiar you are with the Midlands, but apart from like Birmingham, there's a lot of like country pubs in the middle of nowhere where someone like me with like a car full of alcohol is not a usual scene. So it was really good way to like build confidence in terms of like cold calling is one thing, but with pubs especially, you are going to someone's house and someone's business, and they don't know you from anywhere a lot of the time. So it was a really good way to like build confidence and get comfortable with talking to people, and then, you know, selling and influencing and persuading and just building relationships. It was great. So I did that for a year, came back to do another role in like customer marketing, where I was working with supermarkets, making sure our brand. So I don't know if you've ever gone into a supermarket and noticed like there might be like a unit when there's like promotions. Like I did that stuff, like making sure our unit looked as best as possible. And then my final year, I was able to finally get into the role that I thought like I actually signed up for, which was like an assistant brand manager working in the world of whiskies, which I knew nothing about at the time. And I was so excited about that, because like here I am now doing the actual thing that I've grown up thinking that I wanted to do. And I had a terrible experience.
Really?
Not for the whole time, but I just had, that was definitely when I realized your management and the people who manage you, who you work for, can really derail or make your experience. Like I had a horrible experience to the point where I was looking at like, I quickly realized that this isn't going in the way that I wanted it to go, whereas the other people on my intake were like making connections, you could tell that they were on that ladder, and it was very clear where they were going to go next. Whereas I was seeing new things happening and realizing actually what I'm doing isn't that, but I'm in a good position to talk to someone else on another team who is doing stuff that I think speaks to me. And I remember going to that person, so I'm on my final year of the grad scheme, going to that person just to talk to them and be like, hey, like, I love what you guys are doing, like I want to get involved, blah, blah, blah. And this bitch went, I don't know the name, but went to my director, who is literally like 2 levels below the CEO. So she's very senior, to basically say, hey, one of your people in your team is interested in joining my team. Like, which firstly, I don't even understand why that's a problem, but she made it like, oh, like, do you know what I mean? Like one of the people in your team is like unhappy, disgruntled.
Is that what she made it out to seem like that? Basically,
because next thing you know, I got called into an office with my director, who, mind you, I have my she's above, my manager reports into her. So we're removed. And she called me in and she was like, yeah, like, so and so says that you're interested in joining in her team. To be quite honest with you, I don't see what value you bring to this team anyway. And she was very unhappy. She was an absolute stoneheart, cold bitch. Like, I don't know if you ever heard of like the women that are, or the people rather, that have chosen like career first before love, before that. That was her. Like, all she knew was eat, breathe, sleep, work. So for her, for someone to like, I don't know, have aspirations, I don't know, like to also have some bit of happiness, job fulfillment, she couldn't take it. And then next thing you know, there's a massive restructure. And like, imagine a team of 40 people. The only one person that was displaced, so there is no role for them in this new structure, was me. So, yeah, I got...
So, wait.
Yeah, man, I got bullied basically without realizing that I was being bullied.
So because that was in the final bit,
year.
So what was the expectation for you after this third role? What is it? You stay on there for another year, or is it you get like another perm role within the company?
Yeah, you get a permanent role within the company.
And is the expectation is that perm role should be in the last team?
No,
it
could be anything. But obviously, it's like you would think it'll be related, and which it was. It was I wanted to join a team that was called the culture team at the Culture and Entertainment, and they were very much more like doing stuff with like influencers or brands and partnerships. Like it was cultural influencing before it was really as common as it was today. So like doing events, doing stuff that now is commonplace, but at the time it was very different, especially for like alcohol brands to be doing in this country.
Because I wonder if like within the company, like the culture was like, because there's so many red flags as when you were saying this to me, because like the fact that it's your director that's having a conversation with you and not like your manager who's acting as your shield.
And my manager, I had like at least three managers that I recall, maybe three, even more in that 1 year. I had so many managers. My first manager wasn't even based in the same country. So I've always felt like I've got the short end of the stick in terms of I've never had like mentorship. And every time I've reached out to one, they've either let me down or it just hasn't fallen through. And when I've had like managers, they've let me down or they haven't been there. So like I chopped and changed managers. So it's like, here you have this woman telling me you don't see what I bring. But in that same vein, I've had so much like turbulence and I'm having to like build rapport and do stuff with someone who reports into you, and they've been changed how many times? So no shit that you haven't seen anything when everyone's left. But yeah, here I am being told off by a woman that has no understanding of what I do in the day to day, telling me that she doesn't see the value that I bring, and yeah.
So talk to me about like that the whole displacement thing, like the whole process. So because I understand there's like a consultation where they speak to people, understanding where they might place them, and so they said to you like, oh, there's nothing for you, there's no room in the inn.
So I got super lucky because of what was happening with at work, and this also coincided with when I was feeling my lowest and like I had lack of control of my career. I started creating content. I think at the time it was writing blogs and doing stuff like that. I found a lot of enjoyment from doing that. So those things are happening in parallel. And then I'm becoming disgruntled, and I actually go to talk to, I don't know how the conversation came up. So maybe I went to talk about this, what was happening with my bitch of a director, and I was telling HR like, look, like I'm ready to go, kind of thing. Luckily, the HR person, I wish I remembered her name or I could contact her because I owe her a dinner. She was also a grad, and she was like, I'm not meant to tell you this, but very soon there's going to be redundancies. So you're about to leave this company for free when you could get paid to leave. So she gave me the heads up. So then when it actually got announced, I was already one foot out the door. But to actually see the fact that I was doing the right thing because this person has displaced me, as in like, you could have found me in a new role. I literally, like, imagine an org chart. Yeah. And you're not on it. You're not on it. Like, I just know everyone looking at me and being like.
So it was like, everyone just knew.
Yeah, everyone knew because like everyone's looking.
nasty.
Oh, like, okay,
That
cool.
is
I'm here.
nasty.
Like, you know, like in school when like,
you
who
make
made
the
the
team?
team? Who made the team? And I'm like, I'm just there, and I'm just sitting back, just smiling, like because I know what this is, but I'm just thinking, wow, like this is deep. So anyway, they was like the formal like we're gonna talk to you and you go through your options and all this stuff. But I already knew that I fell out of love with this company because I felt like I felt like a number. I didn't feel like I had any real skin in the game. And I also did not feel welcomed. Like, I think it might have improved a little bit now, but at the time, I didn't realize how much I was code switching because we've always grown up where you're going to be the only one. And in that company, like growing up playing rugby and playing golf was the norm. So when you say you don't do those things, people look at you like you're speaking another language. And again, I told you about the grad intake. So when you go through the graduate scheme, you were the same people for a few years. So these people are people that I considered friends. And for me, the turning point was, I think it was my final year again, and my birthday was coming up, my 25th birthday. And I invited all my mates from the grad scheme, we've gone out, we've done stuff like these are my friends. Who I thought, and not one person responded to my invite. And then the guy that I thought was like my guy, I asked him like, bro, what's going on? Like, why are you not coming to my thing? And he said, yeah, I don't want to come because I feel like I'll be the only white person. Firstly, he was wrong because there was another white person. Shout out Ryan. But I was like, oh, you mean like how I'm the only black person in this office every day? And he was like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. And just doubled down and I was like, cool. And at that point, that's when I realized that, wow, like I feel so, not only do I feel out of place, but you also see me as out of place because why would that, I thought we were, bro, I felt so heartbroken and deflated, but there were so many microaggressions where I just felt like I wasn't able to be myself. And like, whereas everyone else is slotting nicely into, you're gonna get promoted, you're gonna do this. I was just there being told that I'm worthless, trying to go to another team, build relationships with someone who I thought was on my team, turned out to be a bigger bitch than the bitch that I was already working for. It was just like, yeah, it was crazy.
That's a lot, especially in your first job, especially when you think you're in the promised land. You know what I mean,
bro?
You worked so hard to get to that point.
Like,
I remember.
I was so like,
and even something you probably don't remember because after your first year, they were doing a round of redundancies.
And I didn't get, I made it through, didn't I?
And you made it through.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess it still works in your favor because you still got the 3 years under your belt.
Yeah.
And maybe through that time, that's when you had the outlet to do the other stuff. Because you were saying that you was in like a down state. So what were you using as your outlet? You said you were blogging. It was Live and Progress, right?
Yeah, oh, you remember Live and Progress. Yeah. The fact you remember is hilarious. Live and Progress used to be like my mantra. And it was a blog where I would just, what was I talking about? Just giving advice, right?
I remember the number one thing was like delayed gratification. That was the thing.
Man, I thought I was so deep back in the day, man. I was just talking about like, and now that you've mentioned it, my blogging was very much, I was creating what I wish existed. So I was creating words of encouragement, motivation, of advice because I needed it for myself. So I felt a lot of enjoyment in like telling someone else based on, so a lot of it was, I remember the first day of my placement year, on the way to work, I don't know if you recall the story, I ripped my trousers. I ripped my trousers on the bus and I remember having a hole in it. And I just remember like, I ended up having to explain to work and then going to the dry cleaners, getting it repaired. Like it became a very funny story, but that was used as a way of like, I can't remember what the message was, but I used to just take examples and give advice. So I was doing that with Live and Progress for a few years. And eventually it merged into Advice, which was the same concept, but I'm Ade, nickname Ads. I was always giving advice. I turned it into a blog like that. And then I wanted it to be bigger than just me. So I removed the personal aspect and then got a bunch of people who are also like blogging, creating content in their space. You were one of them. And we spoke, we gave advice to different people, millennials at the time, on all types of topics. So from like money management to how to travel better to relationships, like everyone was like at the time we thought we were experts, but everybody was like had an interest in a certain field, and we would just give advice, and that then turned into a podcast, advice podcast.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there. But yeah, like blogging, podcasting. I was just like expressing ideas and advice outside of the turbulence that was my career at the time.
Because was you using that like as also a way to kind of understand what you did want to do, or were you still kind of adamant to stay within marketing?
Yeah, honestly, like it was just an escape. And in hindsight, I realized that the thing that I liked most about it is that I was in control. And it was the first time that I was able to see the direct work I put in be reflected. So like I was learning how to build my own website. I was learning how to like write blogs, have a blogging site, logos, all these things. Whereas in my career, I didn't feel like I had, like on a graduate scheme, you are in the motion. You know what I mean? You're pushed. I didn't feel like I had that ownership. So I realized outside of work, not only was I able to be myself, but like my most creative example of myself, my most ambitious self, I was able to get a lot of that from outside. So I don't even think it was related to work. Back then, it was very much that's outside me and this is inside me, and the two did not merge.
That's such a stressful thing, you know, like because you can't be yourself.
Yeah, but it's crazy now because you got
it doesn't work like that. Gen Z do their own thing. Yeah,
mental health day, mental health day, and all this stuff. But that was the norm for us. Like on top of, and then you add the aspect of like code switching on top. It's like you're just always feeling like you're performing. But that was the norm.
It was the norm. I remember. I don't forget when Gio, one of our friends, was talking about like I can't remember when he was listening to a certain song at work, and it was
his headphones came out or something.
No, I don't think his headphones came out. Or someone asked him what he was listening to, and he had to say some like not Justin Bieber, but something crazy. But really, it was listening to like gigs
or something.
Yeah, and I think it's like because what is it? It's like I don't want to say shame, but it's like embarrassment to show who you are because of how people will look at you differently, which is kind of mad. Like when you think about it, I'm so happy things have changed now,
bro. Even back then, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember when people would ask me where you were from, like at the start of my career, of my placement to like the end of my graduate job, the energy changed. Before, when I was in Dow Jones, I'd be like, yeah, I lived in Peckham. The looks that I would get. Yeah. Fast forward a few years. There's this new trendy bar called Frank's. Let's pop up in Peckham, and I'm like, bruh, when I was from Peckham, I couldn't even mention it without you giving me something. Now it's like I can't even afford to be in the area that I used to be embarrassed for being from. It's ridiculous, but gentrification as a whole is a topic in itself, man.
Yeah, it's mad. So then, when you're going through that redundancy pace, so it was 6 weeks off.
Yeah, 6. So I got a job, and I basically told them I lied about my notice period, and so that I had 6.5 weeks because I needed time to just de-stress, and I booked a trip to Cuba. I didn't fight. You enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it.
Why didn't you enjoy it?
I took a trip to Cuba for like, was it a week or 2 weeks?
I think it was
week.
I think it was a week. But you was there before we got there.
I was there before you. So back then I was doing a lot of solo traveling, and I went to Cuba, and no one told me / I didn't do my research to know that in Cuba you should really speak Spanish. Like I'm so used to traveling places and you get by with English, but in Cuba they speak Spanish, but they speak Latin American Spanish, and Cubans are notorious for speaking fast,
very fast.
And then like. Not only that, but Cuba's a closed country where there's still like communism, and like there are rations and things are restricted, like food, everything, like simple things is like you wouldn't stay in a hotel because it's too expensive, so you stay in someone's house.
That's
like,
our particular area.
Yeah, it was, and then it was good just to be like a massive culture shock, and I was getting by like trying not to get like hustled every day and all that stuff, but then. On like my 3rd day, which is the first day you joined me, Fidel Castro died, which in hindsight, that's you were there when Castro died. At the time, it was the worst time to be there because there was 9 days of mourning for each day was a decade of his life, and that meant no samba, no. Basically, all the things that you associate with Cuba was off.
No music. No parties. I remember because it literally got announced when we was inside that party.
We was in a club. I was having the best time of my life. Probably daggering some beautiful Cuban woman, and then the lights come on, and we're thinking, we know it's 2:30. Like it can't. This is still early.
You know, I've got a video of when it happens. You know.
Okay, I didn't see it. That's crazy. And then you found out that Castro died, and then I just remember us that week, like. Looking for alcohol was the equivalent of trying to buy a gun or drugs. Like we had to literally find someone, meet in an alleyway, do an exchange, pay over the odds for a bottle of Havana Club. Like it was crazy.
That was a good time. But then on that, right? So you said you were doing a lot of solo traveling. What like inspired you to do solo traveling?
I was heartbroken. That's a trend. That's a trend in my life. I was heartbroken. Someone told me that we broke up, and one of the things that stuck with me to this day is that she felt like she was the source of my happiness.
Is that what she said?
Yeah, and she didn't like that responsibility, that pressure, and we broke up. Obviously, we broke up for different reasons, but that was the part of it that like stabbed me. And I remember, and the reason why it hurt me is because it was true, in a sense of like. Back then, and I guess always, I've been a lover boy, which some people listening will be like, he wasn't a lover boy to me, and I'm sorry about that. I was in a dark place then. But I just remember feeling so low because I'd put everything into this person, and they've basically told me they didn't like that. They didn't like the responsibility. So like, it was a point to prove to myself that I am going to like derive happiness by myself, and the best way to do that is to experience things by yourself. So like traveling by myself, going to like dates by myself, like going to the cinema by myself. And now that's very common. But when you were like early 20s or 19,
not
like,
normal.
That wasn't normal, going to cinema by yourself.
Bro, even just traveling by yourself, like as soon as you say to someone, I'm solo traveling, they look at you funny. Like, what are you really doing out there? Or like, how are you going to meet people? Exactly. Like, how are you going to enjoy yourself? Yeah.
Exactly that. But that's what sparked it. And like, you know, everything happens for a reason. But had that not happened, I would not have had the impetus to actually start solo traveling, or like even going to. I remember I went to like a meet and greet event. It was kind of dating. It wasn't dating. And I remember like I ended up meeting people that day and thinking like, wow, like I've actually done something I thought I would never be able to do.
It's like literally pushing yourself out your comfort zone.
That's exactly
bro. Like as we're talking about this, I'm just realizing that 23, 24, 25 is very chaotic. Like, that is mad,
bro. Yeah. I've had a lot of resilience is the word that I really appreciate when I ask people how would you describe me? Like I think you've said it. A lot of our friends have used that word, and I definitely see it because everyone's gone through stuff, but I've definitely built like not a resistance, but I'm just able to like
keep going,
but it doesn't feel like it at the time. And that's why I laugh when people say like, oh, you're so resilient, because it doesn't feel resilient.
Do you know what it is? Yeah, I think it's because it comes across as resilience because you're very like open and honest.
Yes.
In a sense that if you're having a shit time,
I'll tell you.
You're saying you're having a shit time. You're like, yeah, it's fine. No, you'll be real and be honest about it. And I think that to other people allows them to kind of be comfortable if they themselves go through something like that. Do you know what I mean? Because people lie. Like people put up a brave face and pretend like everything is all rosy, when in reality, like it's a mess. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's something which I definitely appreciate with you.
That,
because like your attitude and the way you are able to like communicate and face conflict and like deal with hard things, even though they're hard, that's always something I've admired myself, and something which I myself try to live, you know what I mean?
That means a lot, man.
So then, sure, right. So this is now your agency side.
Pagans by name.
Sorry. I'm gonna be. I'll beef it.
No, you can mention it. I don't care. Yeah.
So these guys are like agency side.
Yes.
And I remember we're having a conversation about being on the client side versus agency side. This is now your second agency experience, isn't it? Number one, do you think it's important to kind of experience both sides of the coin, like agency and client?
Yeah.
And then number two, why are they pagans?
I think with everything, if you can get a more well-rounded experience of something, both sides, you have a new appreciation. So like I've always noticed people that have traveled seem to be a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit more open to new experiences. And I feel like with like I always find it interesting when people say, oh, I don't like this, I can never do that. And you're like, oh, why? They're like, I don't know, I never tried it. Like, how can you say you don't like something categorically without trying it. So to that effect, yes, do both. Why are they pagans? Because I've left that place, and I've now taken what I thought was this company wants me. Like I've basically broken up with my last company, who's told me I'm worthless. This new company is like, oh my gosh, you're coming. They're used to getting people straight out of uni, whereas I've come from a big company and I'm going to a small agency. Yeah. Normally it's the other way around. Yeah. So they were like, oh, like calm, like they were so welcoming and stuff. And then as I was in the role, like I was good at my job, but again, I wasn't behaving in a way that they were used to. Like I wasn't blowing someone off, hypothetically speaking, of course, for like a small bit of appreciation. So like on a Friday when it's time for like you have Friday socials and they will get like snacks and beers from the fridge. I'm coming from a place where we have a bar and our friends are coming over and we're having like an actual thing. Like this is not something to be excited about. Or just like small things where like they think they're doing something big, because to a grad with like eyes wide open, wow, we've got a corporate card. Yeah. Like, whereas for me, I'm seeing it for what it is. And there was just personality clashes where people just didn't gel with me because I wasn't like, I was being more of myself, and I wasn't like always super enthusiastic. And then they would micromanage. I remember there was a time when I can't remember how many minutes late, but I remember being at the door and a manager tapping their watch at me because I was minutes late. And it was just not a nice place. And I got put on a performance improvement plan when really it was related to, I felt very much like a personal attack, because it was about like my enthusiasm or my...
They put you on a pit for enthusiasm?
Yeah, I'd have to go into my files if I haven't deleted it to see, but it was nonsense. It wasn't to do with like, it was very much like my attitude as opposed to like numbers or whatever. And I remember in that time I realized that there were some people who were pretty senior that didn't like me, but to my face were very much like, oh, no, but they were like trying to get me out. And I got taken off it. And then the same week in which I closed my flat, like maybe the same day even, like everything's gone through, I got called into a meeting and I was told, yeah, like obviously, you were on a performance improvement plan, you came off and we're seeing the same thing. So yeah. So so in that moment, I became a homeowner at 27 with a mortgage and no job. And for 3.5 months, I had no job. And one thing I hate, people mean well, but at the time, people are like, oh, it's cool. Just focus on advice. Scale up advice. Yeah. Do all these things, like, as if to say, if I could have done those things, I wouldn't have already done it. Or like, everyone was like, no, it's fine. I'm like, bro, do you know? And again, in that period, I learned so much about, so it's funny because obviously your podcast is all about careers and stuff, but unless you've gone through an experience of being unemployed, you don't know what the other side is like. And I remember simple things as, I've got a flat, I'm trying to furnish it. I can't get credit, because to have credit, you need to have a job. So that was an issue in itself. I remember being on dating apps, talking to people. Oh, what do you do? Oh, right now I'm redundant, but unmatched. And that's when I realized that there are so many situations in which we ask people, what do you do? And then we make our own decisions in terms of how we are going to rank them in society, how we're going to value them, how we are going to place worth on what they have to say. And it's something that I try not to do, but I do fall into that trap. And I realized that, wow, like in that moment where I'm no longer employed, I now have less worth to some people. And that's obviously coincided with being told from my last employer that you don't see the value that I bring. So that period was really hard for me, because on one hand, I've done this amazing thing where I've been in shitty paid jobs for most of my career. Well, most of my career, I won't talk about my current pay. And I was able to save up for a flat. Like, even though my parents moved countries, I've bought a flat. And now I don't know how I'm gonna pay my mortgage. And me, like an idiot, I was so proud, like, no, I'm not gonna apply for job seekers allowance. In hindsight, I wish I had applied for that free government money, because that would have helped. But yeah, it was a scary time, but I really shout out my late uncle at the time, who was always been like my backbone, just giving me that motivation to be like, nah, like, it shall be well, the storm will pass. And that it shall be well, the idea that whatever you're going through, it will pass, has become my mantra, to the point where I've got it tattooed on my arm. Like, it's so important to me. And that was that mindset that got me through that period. And then I was able to get a job at, and then I've been at for the last going on 6 years this summer. So
that's great. That's the longest job you've had now, isn't it?
It's the longest job I've had.
Mental, right?
Easily. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with me.
No worries.
Because it's, as you were saying, I was starting to remember back at that period, and it's literally so quite isolating because not many people understand what you're going through. And when people are telling you focus on advice, you're like, my brother, you think that's not what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Because even as you were working on advice and like giving people advice and like helping them navigate the things, and you were talking about your own like self-worth, like how were you trying to rebuild that self-worth and rebuild that identity, would you say?
So I guess that became my identity. Then it was like the feelings that I'm not getting at work, I'm getting from people saying, oh my gosh, love this. I agree with that. That's helpful. That was just becoming my thing. And then I was like, actually, I'm enjoying this so much that who knows where this could go. But I wasn't doing it. I was literally doing it for the feelings of I'm adding value. And that's always been something that's been important to me. So then to be told that you're not adding value, that's why it was such a big thing to like show to myself and to the world, like, here's something that people find valuable and are enjoying. So I was focusing on creating a great product, not focusing on like becoming a better person or like my own career. It was very much, I want to build something that other people can go to when, if they're feeling like me, and they don't have to worry because that's there, as opposed to like, this is going to be great for me. It was never that. It was always, I wanted to make something beautiful and prove that I am worthy, and like it's worthy and it's useful, and just trying to create something that I wish existed for myself, essentially.
So when did it switch? When did it go from that to starting focusing on yourself and like feeding yourself, as it were, fueling yourself?
So at this point, advice is, so I started a podcast again in like 2016, and at this point, so we're in like the COVID era. I'm still doing podcasts on Zoom, which was a terrible time, and doing it with my good friend Benita. We're doing our podcast together, like 90, how many episodes deep? We ended up getting to like just shy of 100, I think. And at some point towards the end of me doing podcasts, so like in 2021, I also started therapy, which was long overdue. And I started therapy because my partner at the time pointed out that an issue in me that I couldn't explain why I was doing it, that was called out by a previous ex. And these two women are very different.
The same issue from the first one?
The same issue. So just in terms of like my inability to like look towards the future and like basically be fully present and actually be like invested. And now I can look back and understand where all that stemmed from. But at the time I didn't. And then I was also grieving the loss of my uncle. So I was depressed without knowing I was depressed. So then got into therapy, and it was crazy because my mental health was improving, but my desire to create content was decreasing. My desire to be on Twitter talking shit to anybody that would listen was decreasing. And then I realized, wow, I've actually been using my creative endeavors as a form of therapy. But now I've found an actual healthy outlet. I no longer have the same desire to be as public as I was. So, and that also coincided with my good friend Benita starting her family, and she was just unable to commit to the same amount of time. So she actually left the podcast, and it was going to be just me back to the original version where I'd have different guests. But like I said, I was losing the love for it. And at the time, podcasts were moving to video podcasts, and I did not have sorry, you know what's actually funny? I just realized as we're talking, where this podcast is, my first picture of like advice was taken on the graffiti outside of the studio.
No way.
Yeah, like as we were walking on the colourful thing. If you Google Ade, you might have to see the picture. So that just threw me off. But yeah, I didn't have the technical know-how to do video content, but I knew that's where I needed to go. So that plus therapy, I was like, I'm gonna stop doing it. I just didn't have the love anymore.
It still takes a lot to admit that and actually drop things, you know what I mean? Because, but at the same time, I guess when you look back at the mission that you did, you were able to solve for it, right?
Yeah, I do. I have regrets, but I don't. It's not like a what if in the sense of not even regrets, like because I know I tried it and I stopped. So the only what if is what if I'd continued going. But at the time, I wasn't able to because my mental health wasn't there, and there's nothing stopping me from deciding tomorrow that I can start again or start fresh and everything. But yeah, man, admitting it is interesting because, like, fun fact, I was at the same launch event. Like, there was podcast launch events as 90s Babies, and they've gone on to do amazing things. So, like, we literally started the podcast around the same time, and they are a clear example of how consistency can take you far. Whereas obviously I wasn't able to do that, but I had to make a choice, and I don't have regrets, but I can definitely own the fact that like I just fell out of love with talking and doing stuff for others when I wasn't doing stuff for myself.
I think that's important though, like falling out of love with something and then knowing that you're not in love with it anymore.
Yeah.
Because I've been in situations like that as well. And it's when you go back and you think, what ifs, and you question your original decision, but you literally have to sit back and say, no, there's a reason why I made the decision to drop this or not pursue this or do this. And sometimes we forget that. Like, especially as the older we get and we're thinking, okay, what am I doing? What path am I on? Kind of vibe.
100%.
So talking of paths, like for you, when you think about like your purpose or your vision, like are those thoughts that you have currently, like where you are in that kind of stage?
I like the fact you asked me that question because I don't know if you will edit this out or not, but when you asked me to be on your podcast, my response was like, I'm honored, but why? Because I look at the guests that you've had and they, even if they don't, they seemingly have their shit figured out and they are like doing well in their career. Whereas I've done a lot of like lateral moves and a lot of stuff where I don't necessarily feel like I'm in any place to be talking about like, this is how you do, because, bruh, if that was the case, give me that advice so I could do it for myself. But, sorry, what's the question again?
Like purpose.
I don't know what my purpose is. And it hurts me to say that. And I remember listening to the episode that you did, I forgot the guest's name, where about, the purpose, the Japanese word for
Ikigai.
Yeah. I remember finding that so helpful, but also struggling because I wasn't able to crack it. But I know I really enjoy connecting people. I know I really enjoy the world of spirits and alcohol and making cocktails. I really enjoy building brands. I haven't worked out my purposes, and for the most of my career, I'll honestly admit that I used to call myself a corporate hippie. So I'll be in the offices, I'll be in the big companies, but I'm floating around. But I'm still able to get the next job, get the promotion if it happens. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have I felt like, especially in our friendship group, I felt like everyone kind of knew this is where they're gonna go. Either I'm gonna go do things on my own as a creative or as an entrepreneur, or I'm gonna do this corporate thing and I'm gonna progress. Whereas I just didn't know.
See, it's interesting you say this, because when I look at your career and when I think about it, it's like through all the hardships that you've been through, because there's not many people that can be made redundant, end up being on PIP and being sacked, and at every level still be leveling up your career. And probably what you haven't noticed, we haven't mentioned it, but like the app that you do with Freeport, which literally is content creation. It's literally showing bartenders what they can do and how they can get better.
True.
It's literally profiling them and giving them to a new audience. And that's something which you literally have done throughout in different careers. And I think sometimes you can't, it's hard to look forward, but it's easier to look back and try and connect the dots. And
that's deep.
That's what you need to start doing. Because honestly, that's deep. Because think about it, every time when you've got a new role, it's literally got you closer to terms of what you're calling. Because for me, I feel like your calling is going to be around connecting people and also giving them a platform, because you gave me a platform before anyone could give me a platform.
Come on, bro.
Like, real talk. Like, this is 2015, 2016. And what you've been able to do for other bloggers, other content creators is evident. You know what I mean? Like, you Google your name and you can see the places that you've spoken, the people that you've spoken to,
That's
the platforms
true.
that you've been, and even the event that you've done where you brought all the push, right?
Yeah, push.
Who does that? Do you know what I mean? No one even does that now.
Yeah.
Where you put everyone in a different room. It was what's the best way to? It was like a conference.
It was a conference.
Literally a conference.
It was like for the culture.
Jamelia, Treasure Tress there.
Treasure Tress.
My man from what's the Black Ballad? Do you know what I'm saying?
Bola Soul.
Do you know what I mean? There's something there. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's like, what am I trying to say? It's like sometimes when we think about our purpose, we think it's about us being us or doing what we need to do for ourselves, but sometimes it could be us finding what we do in service of others, which could be providing that platform to other people and continue to level it up.
Fully agree. And that's only something that I've thought about recently. And I thought about you in that same sense, because I remember I feel like I've always seen you as like a leader. And it was only recently that I've been like, I see myself as a really good deputy leader, in the sense of, like, there are certain aspects of being, there are certain stresses of being like the main person that I don't need, but I am really good at like connecting what's missing between like the leader's vision and what everyone else is saying. And I just feel like I'm really good at like delegating and helping. So I feel like I definitely do agree in the sense of my calling might be in that realm, and I'm kind of owning it. Before I would never be able to admit that, because it's like, why would you ever like meant to be number one? No. But I don't.
I think it's someone said it's another podcast, like playing your position, right? Like even like some of the best coaches in the world, for example, they were never a great footballer.
No, they were.
Some of the great footballers can never teach what they know.
Facts.
I've never seen a video of Thierry Henry trying to coach his players.
And
he's like, why can't you do this? Like, why can't you do it?
You, bro.
So it's only certain things can be done by certain people, and I think it's that understanding, and it's quite clear. And that's why I wanted to have you on the pod, because I think your story in itself is like, it's motivation, it's inspiration to me. Like, I've learned a lot just from this conversation, you know, and about like being in touch with yourself and where you're at and like your goals as well. And I think it's like, no matter what setbacks you may go through, you will bounce back.
Yeah, facts.
You will literally bounce back.
It shall be well, man. Has to.
And so I'm thinking, because of time, I want to go two different directions, but I'm gonna go here. So I want to touch on marketing, and obviously you've done your brand, you've grown it, and for some people who want to step out and do their own thing, marketing probably falls on the wayside, because they think of either sales or they think of just like creating it, but not actually marketing. So what would you suggest as like the first steps for people to, I guess, really gets to grips of how to market their brand and create this personality? Like, should their brand or what they're doing be an extension of themselves, or should it be completely separate?
Not. I've done both.
Yeah.
And there are pros and cons with both. I think it also depends on like the type of industry you're in. For instance, if you are a personal stylist or tailor or something where it's a very personal industry profession, it makes sense to showcase your personality, because people are going to be buying from you, as opposed to, you know, I don't need to know what Bill Gates is having for breakfast. Just make a really good computer, make a good software. So I think it varies, but you should be clear. You should try always to keep it simple, stupid. Like, try and keep it like at the very, very base of what it is. Like, what is your brand about? And then with that being said, if that brand was a person, where would it show up? How would it show up? What do you want people to say about it when they're in the room? And it's like, there's no right or wrong. Well, there are some wrong examples, but you just like do stuff and try and fail quickly. So, you know, I've made a mistake of trying to be many things at once, when at the heart, focus on what it is that you want to do, try something, throw stuff at the wall, what sticks, and then go from there. It's much easier for you to like scale up from a small, very clear base, as opposed to like trying to have everything and then try and narrow after the fact. So I'll just be like, be clear on what it is that you're about, and then yeah, just double down, and hopefully that will kind of speak to, you know, if you're in, you wouldn't want to be, you kind of go for high net worth people, and then you're building a personal brand, and then you're online talking craziness, for instance. That doesn't make any sense. So
talking of online and then channels as well, like how important is social media and influencers?
Social media is, I'm not the person to talk about influencers, but influencers and social media is so important. And the good thing now is the barriers to entry are minimal. Like everyone's got a laptop, everyone's got a computer, a phone in their pocket, so you can just really make content. But for me, content is king. So even if you don't see what you're doing is related to content, like you can still document the journey. You could document like what happening behind the scenes. But people love content, and content is what helps a lot of the big businesses grow.
Because even on content, like content, it can feel quite saturated. Because what I hate is when you start seeing the same thing, or people just following on the same trends, or brands being like inauthentic by copying what everyone else is doing. Exactly. And it's like finding originality or finding your own voice is quite key, but it's also quite difficult because you have to be willing to like get 0 likes or 0 shares.
100%. And then that will come, but you have to keep consistent. It's cliche, but it's all about consistency. Like you just have to keep going. You have to keep going.
And because your alcohol is quite difficult when it comes to advertising, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of, that's why I love the industry so much, because there's a lot of regulations around alcohol and what you can and can't do. So it forces brands and businesses to have to be innovative to get your message across in a way that's legally compliant. Like there are certain ways that you can showcase many lifestyle brands with like the brand helps elevate their social status. Alcohol, you get in trouble for doing that because you can't be promoting the idea that if you consume alcohol, you'll be more fun, or you'll be more sociable, or you'll be more elevated, because that's promoting some really untrue and unhealthy lifestyle choices. So it's like, it's very interesting how you can, you know, show up and do things with people.
It's interesting because when I think of advertising adverts, I get thirsty.
Yeah,
like that seems to be the main image that kind of comes across. And like you literally have to be creative. And I wonder like what other adjacent, say, industries where you can learn from what the alcohol industry does and like give that feeling. It's like, what kind of feeling can you give to people when they see your posts? It's like the feeling, not necessarily what they read.
Exactly that.
Because with all the regulation and like alcohol industry in itself, like where do you see things going, do you reckon?
So great. What I find really interesting now is the fact that Gen Z and Gen Alpha aren't drinking like we used to drink. Even us, we didn't.
Who's Gen Alpha? Is that after Gen Z?
Yeah.
Bro, I started again.
Your niece, nephews, that's Gen Alpha.
Is it?
Yeah. Your daughter is
Gen Alpha.
It's Gen Alpha. Yeah, so people, especially now in this cost of living crisis, people are drinking less, but they're drinking better. So it's very much about premium experiences and experiences as a whole. And I think that transcends just alcohol. So whatever industry you're in, it's all about what experience can you provide to consumers to make them say, you know what, I only have this much money to spend on enjoyment, but I'm going to choose this brand because it's more than just a product. I feel like I'm part of this community. I feel like it's an experience, and that's like the magic word. So I think, you know, experiences that don't revolve around consumption is going to increase because people aren't drinking the same. So you're seeing a lot of the increase of like, you can get pretty much any spirit now in a non-alcoholic.
Yeah, that's version, crazy how things have happened there, you know.
Non-alcoholic version. And also you're seeing the rise of I don't want to call it the third world, but emerging markets who have high population of younger people, and they also like become a middle class. So suddenly you're seeing countries that were overlooked by many brands who are now becoming like the hotbed. Like look at like Dirty December, for instance, like how influential it is for like Afro beats and African culture during that period of December to January. Brands have started to clock on, and alcohol brands are starting to clock on. So you're seeing a lot more stuff with like tapping in, and there's lots of work done with like China and India and all these other markets. So I think it's just going to be a lot more. people got a lot more community-based events, campaigns, as opposed to like the traditional. I think you're going to see less and less like celebrity endorsed alcohol, for instance.
Puffy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad. That's even one of the, what's the word? The challenges when you tell personal brands to personal people with big brands, especially these days.
It can work because like a lot of people don't even know that. You know, George Clooney founded Casamigos and he sold it to Diageo. So there's
pros and cons. No, Ade, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. So I've got a couple of quick fire questions before we finish. So first question, what is one book or resource or documentary, anything like that, that has changed your perspective or your mindset on life?
I'm not a big reader. It's one of my things that I'm changing this year. You know, change my mind. Changed my mindset.
Or made you think about things differently?
I really like actually, to be fair, now the book that I'll probably refer to is The Tanning of America by Steve Stout. Steve Stout's like a hip hop music mogul person, has worked with the likes of Jay-Z, Nas, and it was basically talking about how hip hop and black culture has influenced business and marketing from the dawn of hip hop to where it is now. That was a really interesting book. And also like he was someone that I would look to and be like, I would love to be him, because like he's someone that's connected culture. He's in marketing. He's worked with brands. He understands. He gets it. Someone that looks like me. But that's a really interesting book. I'd recommend people to read The Tanning of America by Steve Stout.
Awesome. What's one hack or tip that you use to help your creativity?
One hack or tip that I used to... Being forced, not having a budget or not having expertise, basically being uncomfortable is the best source of innovation. Because I would not have learned how to build a website if I could afford to get a website. Podcasting, like I learned by myself. So sometimes like embrace that discomfort because it will force you to be innovative.
I like that. What's one piece of advice that you hear people give all the time, but when you hear it, you actually think that's bad advice?
So much bad advice. That's a good question. I think maybe just like just the idea of not feeling your feelings, like whether it be like, oh, you know, like it's fine, like, you know, just like I guess maybe man up. Maybe man up, because that's like growing up, that was something that you used to hear a lot, and that in itself makes you think, okay, so is the manning up part, I mean, I don't have emotions or I don't show emotions, and I've found a lot of strength in being extremely in touch with my emotions. So anything that revolves around just like pacifying and not feeling your feelings, I think is bad. Obviously, there's a time and a place, and there's an extent to which you should not dwell. But I think it's important to feel your feelings and to allow yourself to recognize when you are sad.
I like that. What is a piece of advice that you give to people all the time?
It shall be well.
I like that one. Okay, what would be your words of encouragement for my next guest?
Remember the last time you thought shit was going left and you got through it. You'll get through this.
I like that one. This is for you from the last guest.
Okay.
Need to get better at this system. I mean, not in blue, but highlighted.
That's very similar to what I just said.
Yeah.
I love that. Do I have to read it?
If you want to, yeah.
We're all glued to a wet rock, whizzing through space. Whatever problem feels massive to you in context of the universe, it's not actually that big. So just focus on doing you. That's very timely, because I had some very interesting news this morning / last night, and I'm going to take that to heart.
Love that. And final question, where can people find you?
Oh, I'm Ade Akins on social media. I might have to open my Instagram, but yeah, I'm Ade Akins on X and Instagram. But bear with me, I don't really post like that. So just shoot a message and then let's connect.
Amazing. Thank you so much, my bro.
Appreciate you.
Cool.